The wine glass shattered against marble, and Meridia Hale's world shattered with it. She was pressed against him, her lips still touching his, when the gasps erupted through the ballroom like a wave of scandal crashing against shore. 300 guests, 300 witnesses, 300 pairs of eyes fixed on the impossible scene before them. A servant girl, still wearing the plain gray dress of hired help, kissing the Duke of Ashford on the mouth. Meridia pulled back, her heart slamming against her ribs. The Duke stared at her with eyes the color of slate in winter, shock and fury warring across features that would have been devastatingly handsome if they weren't promising her complete destruction. "What?" he said, his voice low and lethal. "Do you think you're doing?" Her mouth opened, but the words tangled in her chest. How could she explain? How could she make him understand that 30 seconds ago she'd been arranging champagne flutes in the servants' corridor when she'd heard the whispered exchange through the crack in the pantry door? The third glass on the silver tray, the one with the slight chip on the rim, that's the one for the Duke. And you're certain it will work. By morning, Ashford will be dead, and no one will suspect a thing. She'd run, pushed through the crowd with no plan, no thought beyond reaching him before that glass touched his lips. And when she'd seen him raise it, when she'd seen the tiny chip catching candlelight, there had been no time for words. Only action. Only madness. "The wine," she gasped, finally finding her voice. "Your Grace, the wine was—" "Seize her." The command came not from the Duke, but from a woman standing 3 paces behind him. She was perhaps 60, silver-haired, dressed in black silk that made her look like an elegant crow surveying carrion. Her eyes were chips of ice. "This creature has assaulted my grandson. Remove her immediately." 2 footmen moved forward. Meridia stumbled backward, her heel catching on her skirts. "Wait." The Duke held up one hand, and the footman froze. His gaze hadn't left Meridia's face. Searching, assessing, dangerously intelligent. "The wine, you said. What about the wine?" "It was poisoned." The words tumbled out, desperate and wild. "I heard them planning it. In the corridor, the third glass on the silver tray, the one with the chip. They said by morning you'd be—" "She's clearly deranged," the silver-haired woman interrupted, her voice cutting as broken glass. "Tristan, this is absurd. Have her removed before she causes further embarrassment." But the Duke was no longer looking at Meridia. He was looking down, at the marble floor where the spilled wine was pooling, spreading, and Meridia heard someone scream. The wine was eating through the marble, not quickly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Tiny wisps of acrid smoke rose from the spreading stain. The white stone was pitting, corroding, dissolving where the liquid touched. "My God," someone breathed. The Duke's face had gone pale beneath his aristocratic composure. He looked from the ruined floor to Meridia, and something shifted behind his eyes. The fury didn't disappear, but it redirected, aimed now at an enemy she couldn't see. "No one leaves this room," he commanded, his voice carrying with the authority of a man who had never been disobeyed. "Guards, seal the doors. Someone just attempted to murder me in my own home." Chaos erupted. Women shrieked. Men shouted. The silver-haired woman, his grandmother, Meridia realized, pressed one hand to her heart, though her eyes remained calculating rather than shocked. And through it all, Meridia stood frozen, the taste of him still on her lips. She had kissed a duke, in front of everyone, to save his life, and now she was trapped in a ballroom with a murderer, a scandal, and a man whose gaze kept returning to her with an intensity that made her knees weak for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "You!" The Duke's voice cut through the noise. He was striding toward her, guests parting before him like the Red Sea before Moses. "You heard them planning this. You saw something. Someone." Meridia shook her head helplessly. Only voices. Through the door. I didn't see faces. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell sandalwood, and something darker, richer. Close enough to see the rapid pulse at his throat, evidence that his composure was harder won than it appeared. "Then you're going to help me find them," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "Because whoever did this won't stop. And you, Miss Hale," she murmured. "Meridia Hale. Miss Hale." A muscle worked in his cheek. "You've just become the most important witness in England. And also, I'm afraid, the most scandalous woman in London." Before she could respond, the doors burst open. More guards flooded in, followed by a man in physician's black, followed by what appeared to be half the household staff. The Duke turned away to issue commands, and Meridia was left standing in the center of the ballroom floor, surrounded by whispers and stares and the acrid smell of poison eating through stone. She had saved his life, and in doing so, she had destroyed her own. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of interrogation and chaos. Meridia was escorted, not roughly but firmly, to a small antechamber off the main ballroom, where she was made to repeat her story no fewer than 7 times, to the Duke's steward, to the head of his household guard, to a magistrate who arrived looking rumpled and irritated at being summoned from his bed, and finally, once more, to the Duke himself. He stood by the window throughout her account, his back to her, his silhouette sharp against the candlelight. She couldn't read his expression, couldn't gauge whether he believed her or thought her complicit in some elaborate scheme. When she finished, silence stretched between them like a held breath. "You're a hired servant," he said finally, not turning. "Brought in for the evening to assist with the ball." "Yes, Your Grace." "From which agency?" "Pemberton's, Your Grace, in Cheapside." "And you happened to be in the servants' corridor at precisely the right moment to overhear a murder plot." Meridia's hands twisted in her lap. "I was arranging the champagne service. The voices came from the pantry adjacent. I didn't seek them out." "No." He turned then, and his eyes pinned her in place. "You simply decided to sprint through a ballroom of 300 guests and kiss a duke you'd never met. That was your chosen method of intervention." Heat flooded her cheeks. "There wasn't time. You were raising the glass. If I'd called out, you wouldn't have heard me over the music. If I'd tried to reach you normally, the crowd would have slowed me down. I acted on instinct." "Instinct." He repeated the word as if testing it for falsehood. Most servants' instincts would have led them to find a footman, alert a guard, do anything other than create the most explosive scandal of the season. "Most servants wouldn't have acted at all," Meridia shot back, and then immediately wished she could swallow the words. This was a duke. She was nothing. Speaking to him this way could earn her far worse than dismissal. But something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or reluctant respect. "No," he said quietly. "They wouldn't have." The door opened, and the silver-haired woman swept in without waiting for permission. Up close, Meridia could see the family resemblance, the same strong jaw, the same piercing intelligence in her eyes. But where the Duke's demeanor was controlled fire, hers was pure frost. "The guests have been questioned and released," she announced. "None of them saw anything useful. The servants are being interviewed now. But I hold little hope. Whoever orchestrated this was careful. Grandmother. The immediate concern is not the assassin." She cut him off with the ease of long practice. "The immediate concern is the scandal. By morning, every drawing room in London will be buzzing with news that the Duke of Ashford was kissed by a common maid at his own ball. Your prospects for an advantageous match will be severely damaged." "Someone just tried to kill me," the Duke said flatly. "I'm less concerned with marriage prospects. You should be concerned with both." His grandmother's gaze swept to Meridia, dismissive and thorough. "The girl must disappear. We'll give her money, secure her passage to the continent, and craft a narrative that minimizes the damage. By next week, no one will remember her name. Meridia's stomach dropped. Disappear. Passage to the continent. She thought of her mother, of her brother Bram, of the small rented rooms they called home. She couldn't simply vanish. I'm afraid that won't be possible. The Duke's voice was calm, but something in it made his grandmother pause. Miss Hale is the only person who heard the conspirators. She may remember details she doesn't realize are significant. Until we identify who wants me dead, she stays. Stays? The Dowager's composure cracked, revealing genuine shock. Drystone, you cannot possibly suggest— I suggest nothing. I'm informing you. He moved toward Meridia, and she had to fight the urge to shrink back. Miss Hale will remain at Ashford House as my guest until this matter is resolved. Your guest? The Dowager laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. A hired servant? The scandal will only deepen. People will assume. Let them assume. The Duke's mouth pressed into a thin line. I would rather weather gossip than attend my own funeral. Meridia finally found her voice. Your Grace, I can't. My family. Will be notified and provided for during your absence. He cut through her objection with aristocratic efficiency. You'll have comfortable rooms, appropriate clothing, and my protection. In exchange, you'll work with my investigators to identify the voices you heard. And when we find them, when this is resolved, his expression gave nothing away. Then you'll be free to return to your life, with compensation for your trouble and references that will secure you any position you desire. It was a reasonable offer, generous even. So why did it feel like stepping into a gilded cage? What if I refuse? The question escaped before she could stop it. The Dowager snorted. Then you'll leave this house with nothing, and pray the assassins don't decide you're a loose end worth eliminating. The words hung in the air like a threat, because they were a threat. Whoever had tried to poison the Duke knew that Meridia had foiled their plan, knew her face, possibly her name. Out there, she was vulnerable. In here, she was protected. But she was also trapped. I'll stay, she heard herself say, until this is resolved. But I have conditions. The Dowager's eyes widened with outrage. The Duke's narrowed with something more dangerous, interest. Conditions, he repeated. You're a servant girl who just upended my entire evening, and you have conditions. I saved your life. Meridia lifted her chin, drawing on reserves of courage she hadn't known she possessed. That entitles me to at least be heard. For a moment, no one spoke. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight. Then, impossibly, the Duke smiled. It transformed his face, softening the severity, revealing a warmth that made her breath catch. Very well, Miss Hale. He gestured toward a chair. Let's hear your conditions. Meridia's mind raced as she lowered herself into the offered chair. She had perhaps 30 seconds to think of conditions that would protect her without seeming presumptuous. The Dowager watched her like a hawk tracking a mouse. The Duke waited with the patience of a man accustomed to negotiation. First, she began, her voice steadier than she felt. My mother and brother must be told I'm safe. Not by a servant, not by a messenger they don't know. By me. I want to write them myself, and I want the letter delivered by someone trustworthy. The Duke nodded. Reasonable. What else? I won't pretend to be something I'm not. Meridia met his gaze directly. You've said I'll be a guest, but everyone saw me in servant's grey tonight. The ton knows what I am. I won't play at being a lady only to be exposed and humiliated. Ah, the Duke exchanged a glance with his grandmother. That's where things become complicated. The Dowager stepped forward, her expression calculating. The girl is correct, that she cannot simply appear as a gentlewoman without explanation. However, there is a way to manage this. Meridia didn't like the gleam in the older woman's eyes. What way? We present you as precisely what you are, but elevated. The dowager began to pace, her mind clearly working through angles and approaches. A distant relation fallen on hard times, forced into service by circumstance. You were working the ball incognito when you discovered the plot and saved my grandson's life. It's romantic, heroic. The Tun loves nothing more than a sympathetic origin story. You want me to lie about my family? I want you to survive the next few weeks without being torn apart by gossip. The dowager's voice sharpened. Left unmanaged, the narrative becomes a maid with ideas above her station, throwing herself at a duke. Managed correctly, it becomes a brave young woman of gentle birth, rescuing a nobleman from assassination. Which story would you prefer? Meridia hated that it made sense, hated even more that she had no better alternative. My family won't lie for me. They won't need to. The Duke spoke now, his tone thoughtful. We'll say your father was a distant cousin of the Ashford line, third or fourth removed, who lost his fortune and passed away young. Your mother remarried beneath her station out of necessity. It's close enough to truth to be unverifiable, and sympathetic enough to deflect criticism. And what happens when this ends? Meridia pressed. When the assassin is caught and I'm no longer useful, I return to service with everyone knowing I spent weeks living in a duke's house. My reputation will be destroyed regardless. Which brings us to your compensation. The Duke leaned against the fireplace mantel, crossing his arms. When this concludes, you'll receive a sum sufficient to establish yourself independently. Additionally, my grandmother will provide references and introductions that could secure you a position as a companion to a respectable family. Or if you prefer, the means to open a small business of your own. Meridia felt the air leave her lungs. Independence, real independence, not scraping by on hired work, not dependent on her brother's unreliable schemes. A future she'd never dared imagine. You would do all that, she said slowly, for a stranger who kissed you without permission. I would do all that for the woman who saved my life. Something shifted in his demeanor. And for the witness who may help me identify who wants me dead before they try again. The dowager made an impatient sound. Are we agreed then? The girl stays, we craft an appropriate fiction, and we proceed with discretion? One more condition. Meridia stood, forcing herself to face them both as an equal, even though everything in her upbringing screamed that she was overreaching. Whatever I learn, whatever I discover, you tell me the truth. Don't hide things to protect me, or manage me, or keep me compliant. If I'm risking my safety to help you, I deserve honesty. The Duke studied her for a long moment. You're asking me to trust you with information that could be dangerous. I'm asking you to treat me as an ally, not a pawn. Dryston, the dowager warned. This is unwise. She's an unknown. We have no idea where her true loyalties lie. My loyalties, Meridia said quietly, lie with staying alive. Someone in this house tried to murder the Duke tonight. That means someone in this house knows I stopped them. Our interests are aligned, Your Grace, whether you trust me or not. The logic was sound, and she could see him recognizing it. He pushed off from the mantel and crossed to her, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You're not what I expected, he said. Neither are you. What did you expect? Meridia considered. Someone more angry. I did kiss you in front of 300 people. That ghost of a smile again, there and gone. The kiss was unexpected. The poison was worse. I find I can only sustain one grievance at a time, and attempted murder takes priority. How practical of you. I'm a very practical man, Miss Hale. He extended his hand. Do we have an agreement? She looked at his offered hand. Elegant, strong, bearing the signet ring of his title. 12 hours ago, she'd been counting the coins in her purse, wondering if she could afford new stockings before winter. Now she was bargaining with a duke in his private study, agreeing to live in his house, help solve his attempted murder, and pretend to be his distant cousin. The world had gone mad. Or perhaps she had. Meridia placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and firm, and something electric passed between them. A spark of connection that had nothing to do with gratitude or arrangement. "We have an agreement," she said. "Then, welcome to Ashford House." He released her hand, but his gaze held hers a moment longer. "I hope you're prepared, Miss Hale, because I suspect the next few weeks will be unlike anything either of us has experienced." Behind them, the Dowager muttered something about impulsive decisions and scandal management. But Meridia barely heard her. She was too busy wondering what she'd just agreed to, and why, despite every rational instinct screaming at her to run, some reckless part of her heart wanted to stay. Meridia woke to sunlight streaming through curtains she didn't recognize. For a disorienting moment, she thought she was dreaming. The bed beneath her was impossibly soft, the sheets smooth as water against her skin. The room smelled of lavender and beeswax, clean and expensive, nothing like the cramped quarters she shared with her mother and brother. Then memory crashed back. The ballroom, the poison, the kiss. She sat up abruptly, her pulse thundering in her ears. This was real. She was in Ashford House, guest of a duke whose life she'd saved and whose lips she'd tasted. And somewhere in this gilded prison, an assassin's identity waited to be discovered. A soft knock at the door made her flinch. "Miss Hale?" A young woman's voice, gentle and uncertain. "I'm Tansy. His Grace assigned me as your maid. May I enter?" Meridia pulled the covers higher, acutely aware that she was wearing a borrowed nightgown of finer fabric than anything she'd ever owned. "Yes. Come in." The girl who entered was perhaps 17, with auburn hair tucked beneath a cap, and kind hazel eyes. She carried a tray with tea and toast, setting it on the bedside table with practiced grace. "I've drawn a bath for you, miss, and there are clothes laid out in the dressing room. Her Grace sent them this morning. They belong to the Duke's late sister, Lady Adarin. Similar in size to you, I'm told." Meridia's throat tightened. The Duke had a sister? "Yes, miss. She passed 3 years ago. Fever took her in the end, though she'd been fragile ever since the scandal with Lord Valdres the year before." Tansy's expression flickered with old grief. "His Grace doesn't speak of her, but the Dowager keeps her things preserved. She said you might as well make use of them, rather than let them gather dust." It was practical, Meridia supposed, but wearing a dead woman's clothes felt like stepping into a ghost's skin. "Thank you, Tansy." She reached for the tea, needing something to ground her. "What time is it?" "Nearly 10, miss. His Grace has requested you join him in the study at 11. He wishes to begin reviewing the events of last night, while they're fresh in your memory. 1 hour. 1 hour to transform from a hired servant into something approximating a gentleman's cousin." Meridia took a steadying breath and pushed back the covers. The bath was heaven. Hot water scented with rose oil, soap that lathered like cream. Meridia scrubbed away the lingering traces of last night's chaos and tried not to think about how quickly she could become accustomed to this luxury. The clothes Tansy had selected were beautiful, but restrained. A morning dress of soft dove gray, with delicate white embroidery at the collar and cuffs. It fit surprisingly well, and when Meridia caught her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a lady. The deception had already begun. "You'll need to learn how to walk in those slippers," Tansy observed, watching Meridia wobble slightly. "And your posture could use work. But you've the bones for it, miss. The face, too. No one would guess you weren't born to this." "I wasn't, though." Meridia met the girl's eyes in the mirror. "You know that. Everyone in this house knows that." Tansy's expression softened. I know you saved His Grace's life, miss. That's what matters below stairs. The rest, she shrugged. The rest is theater. We all play our parts. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to her since the chaos began. Meridia blinked against unexpected tears. Thank you, Tansy. Just doing my job, miss. But she smiled, and Meridia felt fractionally less alone. At precisely 11, Meridia made her way to the Duke's study. The corridors of Ashford House seemed designed to intimidate. Soaring ceilings, ancestral portraits glaring from the walls, marble floors that echoed with every step. She passed servants who nodded respectfully, their eyes curious, but not unkind. The study door was ajar. Meridia knocked and heard the Duke's voice call, "Enter." He stood behind a massive oak desk, papers spread before him, his coat discarded over a chair. In shirt sleeves and waistcoat, he looked less formal than last night, but no less imposing. The morning light caught the sharp angles of his face, the intensity in his slate-colored eyes as they tracked her entrance. "Miss Hale, you look rested." "I slept surprisingly well, considering." She stopped before his desk, uncertain whether to sit or stand. "The accommodations are more than generous. They're adequate." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Meridia sat, folding her hands in her lap. The borrowed dress rustled around her, a constant reminder that nothing she wore belonged to her. "I've had my investigators working through the night," the Duke continued, lowering himself into his own chair. "The poisoned wine was prepared in the kitchens, but no one admits to knowing which servant added it to the tray. The conspirators you overheard could have been anyone. Staff, guests, or intruders who slipped in during the chaos of the ball." "You have no suspects?" "I have too many suspects." His expression hardened. "I'm not a popular man, Miss Hale. My father's death left me with enemies who resent my inheritance, rivals who covet my lands, and reformist politics that have made me unwelcome in certain circles. Any one of them might have reason to want me dead." Meridia absorbed this. "Then how do we narrow it down?" "We start with what you heard." He leaned forward, his gaze sharpening. "You said there were two voices. Male, female, young, old? Any accent, any distinctive speech pattern?" She closed her eyes, trying to pull the memory from the terror that had clouded it. "Both male, I think. One older, rougher, a servant's accent maybe. The other more refined, but cold, cultured. The kind of voice that's used to giving orders. A gentleman, then. Or someone educated above their station. Perhaps." She opened her eyes. There was one other thing. The refined voice. He mentioned a name. Just once, almost too quiet to hear. The Duke went very still. "What name?" Meridia hesitated. She hadn't remembered until just now, the detail surfacing like a bubble from deep water. "Valdris," she said. He said, "Valdris will be pleased." The color drained from the Duke's face. Meridia had never seen a man's expression change so completely, so quickly. One moment the Duke was composed, analytical, in control. The next, he looked as though she'd driven a blade between his ribs. "Your Grace?" She half rose from her chair. "What is it? Who is Valdris?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned away, moving to the window with the rigid gait of someone fighting to contain an explosion. His hands gripped the windowsill, knuckles white. "Your Grace, Valdris is dead." The words came out flat, final. "He died 4 years ago. I watched them put him in the ground." Meridia sank back into her seat, confusion warring with the certainty of what she'd heard. "I'm telling you what the voice said. Perhaps there's another Valdris, or there is no other Valdris." The Duke turned, and the anguish in his eyes stole her breath. "Emmerich Valdris was my closest friend. We grew up together, trained together, trusted each other with everything. And then he betrayed me." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken history. "What happened?" Meridia asked quietly. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to a cabinet, poured himself a glass of something amber, and drank half of it before speaking. "Emmerich wanted what I had, not just the title, though that was part of it, but the woman I was to marry, Lady Idaline Corwell." His voice hardened. "He seduced her, ruined her reputation, and when I confronted him, he tried to kill me. We dueled. I won. He died on the field, and Idaline took her own life a month later." Meridia pressed her hand to her mouth. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be. It was years ago, and I've made my peace with it." But his eyes told a different story, wounds that had scarred, but never fully healed. "What matters is that Emmerich Voldris cannot be behind this. The dead don't orchestrate assassinations. Unless someone is using his name," Meridia said slowly, "as a message or a taunt." Recognition dawned in the Duke's gaze. "Explain." "Whoever wants you dead clearly has personal reasons. Otherwise, why poison? Why this elaborate scheme instead of a simple hired knife in an alley?" She stood, pacing as the thoughts crystallized. "They want you to suffer, to fear, to know that your past is catching up to you, using Valdris's name. It's psychological warfare. You reason like an investigator, not a servant. My father was a clerk before he died. He taught me logic, observation, how to see patterns." She met his eyes. "I may not know your world, Your Grace, but I know how to think." A flicker of respect crossed his features, the same reluctant acknowledgement she'd glimpsed last night. "Then think about this. Who would know about Valdris? Who would understand what his name means to me? Someone close to you. Someone who was there during the scandal, who watched it unfold." Meridia's mind raced. Family, old servants, friends from that time who might have turned enemy. The list is still too long. Then we narrow it. She stepped closer to his desk. "You said there were enemies who resent your inheritance. What enemies? Be specific." The Duke set down his glass and moved to his chair, pulling out a drawer filled with correspondence. "My cousin, Lord Aldrich Ashford. He was next in line before I was born, and he's never forgiven the accident of my existence. Then there's Baron Fenwick, whose lands border mine. We've been in dispute over water rights for years. Sir Edmund Blackmore lost a fortune when I refused to invest in his shipping venture. Any of them connected to Valdris? Aldrich knew him. They moved in the same circles." The Duke's teeth clenched. "But Aldrich is a fool and a coward. He hasn't the spine for murder. Cowards hire others to do their dirty work." "True." He looked at her with new assessment. "You're suggesting my own cousin tried to have me killed. I'm suggesting we can't rule anyone out, not until we have evidence." The study door opened without warning, and the Dowager swept in like a thundercloud in silk. Her gaze moved from the Duke to Meridia and back, her lips pressing thin. "I see you've begun your investigation," she said coolly. "How productive." "Grandmother." Miss Hale remembered something significant. The conspirators mentioned, "Ooh, I heard." The Dowager's eyes were arctic. Valdris, a name I'd hoped never to hear again in this house. Meridia watched the older woman carefully. There was something beneath the cold exterior. Not grief, exactly, but something raw, something unresolved. "You knew him," Meridia said. It wasn't a question. "I knew him." The Dowager moved to a chair, sitting with the rigid posture of a queen holding court. "I warned Drestan against the friendship from the beginning. The Valdris family was never trustworthy. Ambition without honor, charm without substance. But my grandson was young and foolish, and he wouldn't listen." "Grandmother? Don't grandmother me." Her voice cracked like a whip. "I buried my granddaughter because of grief over that scandal. Darren never recovered from watching her brother nearly destroyed. She weakened, fell ill, died. Emmerich Valdres killed her as surely as if he'd held the blade himself. The revelation hit Meridia like a physical blow. The sister whose clothes she wore, whose room she likely occupied, dead because of the same man whose name now haunted this investigation. "I didn't know," she said softly, "about Lady Aderin. I'm so sorry." "You couldn't have known." The dowager's expression softened fractionally. "But you understand now why this name carries weight. Why whoever invokes it knows exactly what wounds they're reopening." The Duke had gone very still. "You think this is targeted revenge, not just against me, but against the family." "I think someone wants to destroy everything we are," his grandmother replied. "And they're using our own ghosts to do it." Meridia looked between them, the Duke with his controlled fury, the Dowager with her icy resolve, and felt the weight of their history pressing down on her shoulders. She'd stumbled into something far more complex than a simple assassination attempt. This was war, and she was standing in the middle of it. "Then we give them a battle," she said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "We find out who's behind this, and we make them regret ever thinking they could use your pain against you." The Dowager studied her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, she smiled. "Perhaps," she said. "You're not entirely useless after all." 3 days passed in a blur of investigation and adjustment. Meridia learned the rhythms of Ashford House, which corridors to avoid, which servants to trust, which rooms held memories too painful for casual entrance. She pored over guest lists from the ball, interviewed staff members alongside the Duke's investigators, and filled notebooks with observations that might or might not prove useful. She also learned to walk in fine slippers, to hold her teacup correctly, and to navigate the intricate dance of aristocratic manners that Tansy patiently taught her each morning. "You're a quick study," Tansy said on the third afternoon, watching Meridia execute a passable curtsy. "Some ladies take years to learn what you've absorbed in days." "I don't have years." Meridia straightened, smoothing her borrowed skirts. "The longer this takes, the more danger everyone's in." A knock interrupted them. One of the footmen appeared, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Hale, you have a visitor. Lady Venetia Crane. She's in the blue drawing room." Meridia's blood ran cold. She didn't know the name, but she knew what it meant. Someone from society had come to inspect her. "I wasn't aware I'd be receiving callers." Her ladyship was quite insistent. The footman's discomfort deepened. "The Dowager is occupied with correspondence and cannot intervene. His Grace is out on business," meaning Meridia would face this alone. She found the blue drawing room after 2 wrong turns, her pulse quickening with dread. The woman waiting inside was everything Meridia was not. Golden-haired, porcelain-skinned, draped in a visiting dress that probably cost more than Meridia's family earned in a year. She sat like a painting come to life, beautiful and utterly untouchable. "Miss Hale." Lady Venetia didn't rise. Her eyes swept over Meridia from head to toe, cataloging and dismissing in a single glance. "How fascinating to finally meet you." Meridia curtsied as Tansy had taught her. "Lady Venetia, I wasn't expecting visitors." "No, I imagine you weren't." The woman gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Every instinct screamed warning, but refusing would only make things worse. Meridia sat, keeping her posture straight, her expression neutral. "I must say," Lady Venetia continued, "the ton is absolutely buzzing about you. The mysterious servant girl who kissed the Duke and saved his life. Such a romantic story. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Almost too romantic to be believed. I assure you, the events were quite real." "Oh, I don't doubt something happened. But stories have a way of evolving, don't they? Details shift. Motivations become murky." Lady Venetia leaned forward slightly. "Some people are suggesting you stage the entire thing. that there was no poison, no conspiracy, merely an ambitious girl who saw an opportunity and seized it. Meridia's hands clenched in her lap. The poison ate through Marble. Dozens of witnesses saw it. Witnesses can be bought. Evidence can be manufactured. Lady Venetia's voice dropped to a silken purr. I'm not saying I believe the rumors, Miss Hale. I'm simply warning you that others do. And once society decides you're a schemer, no amount of truth will change their minds. Why tell me this? Meridia asked carefully. We've never met. You have no reason to help me. Help you? Lady Venetia laughed, a crystalline sound devoid of warmth. Oh, my dear, I'm not here to help you. I'm here to see what you are. She rose, moving around the room like a predator circling prey. The Duke of Ashford is the most eligible bachelor in England. His title, his fortune, his lands, they're prizes beyond measure. Every matchmaking mama in London has been angling for an introduction, and suddenly you appear from nowhere, a servant with no connections, no fortune, no breeding, and you've installed yourself in his house. I didn't install myself anywhere. His Grace insisted I stay for the investigation. His Grace. Lady Venetia stopped before the fireplace, examining her reflection in the mirror above it. Yes, let's discuss His Grace. I've known Drystan Ashford since we were children. Our families have an understanding, an expectation. When he marries, and he will marry, it was always assumed the bride would be me. The pieces clicked together. This wasn't just social curiosity. This was a rival staking her claim. I have no designs on the Duke, Meridia said quietly. I'm here because someone tried to kill him, and I may be able to help identify who. When this is over, I'll leave. Will you? Lady Venetia turned, her smile precise as a scalpel. That's what you say now. But I've seen how he looks at you, Miss Hale. I saw it at the ball, before everyone started screaming. He was looking at you like you were something rare and unexpected. Something interesting. You were watching us? I watch everything. Lady Venetia crossed to where Meridia sat, stopping close enough to force her to tilt her head back. The Duke is not a man who gives his attention lightly. If he's giving it to you, there's a reason. And I want to know what that reason is. Meridia stood, refusing to be loomed over. They were nearly the same height, but Lady Venetia had years of aristocratic confidence behind her. Meridia had only the stubborn pride her father had taught her. His Grace's attention is focused on staying alive, she said steadily, as is mine. Whatever romantic narrative you've constructed is entirely in your imagination. We'll see. Lady Venetia stepped back, smoothing her gloves. I'll be watching, Miss Hale. Every step you take, every word you speak, every glance you exchange with Drystan, I'll be watching. And when you make a mistake, and you will make a mistake, I'll be there to ensure everyone sees it. She swept toward the door, then paused on the threshold. Oh, and Miss Hale, that dress you're wearing, it belonged to Aderin Ashford. We were friends, she and I. Very close friends. Her eyes glittered with malice. She would have hated seeing a servant in her clothes. I thought you should know. She was gone before Meridia could respond. For a long moment, Meridia simply stood there, trembling with a mixture of fury and fear. Lady Venetia had declared war, and Meridia had no weapons to fight with, no social standing, no powerful allies, no experience in the vicious games these people played. She's always been like that. The voice came from the doorway. Meridia spun to find a young woman standing there, dark-haired, dark-eyed, with the same sharp features as the Duke, but softened by a warmth he rarely showed. She looked perhaps 19, dressed in mourning gray that matched Meridia's own gown. I'm Ceres, the woman said. Drystan's sister, the one they don't talk about. Meridia blinked. I didn't know he had. Another sister? Yes, most people forget. Aderin was the beauty, the favorite. I'm the spare. Saris entered the room with an easy grace. "And you're the woman who kissed my brother in front of 300 people. I have to say, it's the most exciting thing that's happened in this house in years." Despite everything, Meridia felt a surprised laugh escape her. "That's one way to look at it." "It's the only way to look at it," Saris grinned. "Now come with me. I'll show you everything you need to know to survive Lady Venetia and her poisonous little schemes." She held out her hand, and Meridia took it without hesitation. Perhaps she had an ally after all. Saris Ashford became Meridia's unlikely guide through the treacherous waters of aristocratic life. Over the following week, she taught Meridia which forks to use at dinner, which topics were safe for conversation, and which members of the ton were secret allies versus hidden enemies. She shared gossip with wicked delight, skewered pretentious visitors with commentary, and made Meridia laugh for the first time since the night of the ball. But sometimes, Meridia noticed, Saris asked questions that felt oddly specific, probing inquiries about what the investigators had discovered, what names had surfaced, what progress had been made. She always framed them casually, wrapped in sisterly concern, but the pattern nagged at something in Meridia's mind. "Lady Venetia has been telling everyone you're a fortune hunter," Saris reported one afternoon, sprawled across Meridia's bed with unladylike abandon. "She's also implied you might be connected to the assassination attempt yourself." Meridia looked up from the correspondence she was reviewing, another stack of threatening letters the Duke had received over the past year. "She thinks I tried to kill your brother, and then saved him? That makes no sense." Logic has never been Venetia's strong suit. Malice, however, that she excels at. Karis sat up, her expression growing serious. "You should know that my grandmother is considering her advice." "What advice?" "That you should be removed from the house, sent away before you cause further scandal." Saris's dark eyes met hers. "Grandmother fears you're becoming a liability." The words stung more than they should have. Meridia had always known her position here was precarious, but hearing it stated so baldly made the borrowed dress feel suddenly suffocating. "Perhaps she's right," Meridia said quietly. "Perhaps I should leave." "Don't you dare." Karis grabbed her hand. "You're the first interesting thing that's happened in this mausoleum of a house since Adarin died. And more importantly, you're good for Drystan. I barely see him, which is precisely how I know you're good for him." Saris smiled. "He's avoiding you because you make him feel things. My brother has spent 4 years building walls around his heart, and you're crumbling them without even trying. It terrifies him." Meridia thought of their brief encounters, the charged silences, the lingering glances, the way his voice softened when they spoke alone. She'd told herself it meant nothing. She'd been lying. "It doesn't matter what I make him feel," she said. "I'm a servant's daughter. Lady Venetia is right about that much." Lady Venetia is a scheming harpy who cares more about titles than people. Karis stood, pulling Meridia with her. "Come on, there's something I want to show you." She led Meridia through corridors she hadn't yet explored, up a narrow staircase to a tower room flooded with afternoon light. The walls were lined with paintings, not the formal portraits that dominated the main house, but vibrant landscapes and intimate scenes. In the center stood an easel, surrounded by brushes, palettes, and the sharp smell of turpentine. "This was Adarin's studio," Karis said softly. "She was an artist, a real one, not just a lady dabbling in watercolors. She saw beauty everywhere, captured it, made it permanent." Meridia moved closer to the paintings, struck by their skill and emotion. A garden at sunset, a storm over the sea, and there, in the corner, a portrait of 2 young men, arms slung around each other's shoulders, laughing. "That's Drystan," she breathed, recognizing the Duke's features made younger, softer, unmarked by loss. "And the other?" "Emmerich Voldris." Karis's voice hardened. Darren painted this a month before everything fell apart. She worshipped Emmerich. We all did. He was charming, brilliant, seemingly perfect. None of us saw what he really was until it was too late. Meridia studied the painted face, handsome, confident, with eyes that seemed to glitter even in oils. What was he really? Hungry, desperate for power, status, everything he felt entitled to but didn't have. His family's fortune was gone, gambled away by his father. Marrying Lady Italine would have restored it, but she was promised to Dryston. So Emmerich decided to destroy the obstacle. And when he failed, he destroyed himself instead. Karis moved to the window, staring out at the gardens below. But the damage was done. Dryston blamed himself for not seeing it sooner. Adrian blamed herself for introducing them. And her voice cracked. I was just the little sister who couldn't fix anything. Meridia crossed to her, placing a gentle hand on her arm. You were a child. None of it was your fault. I know that now. But Dryston still carries it. The guilt, the fear of trusting anyone again. Saris turned to face her. That's why you matter, Meridia. You broke through. Without trying, without scheming, without any agenda except saving his life. He doesn't know how to process that. I don't know how to process it either. Then figure it out together. Saris's eyes glittered with determination. The Countess of Ashworth is hosting a ball in 3 days. It'll be the first major event since the assassination attempt. Dryston will need to attend, and he'll need someone beside him who isn't Lady Venetia. I'm suggesting you stop pretending this is just an arrangement. Karis's grip tightened on her hand. Fight for him. Fight for yourself, or spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. That evening, Meridia found herself alone in the library when the Duke entered. He stopped short, clearly not expecting to find her there. The firelight caught his features, illuminating exhaustion and something else, something that made her pulse quicken. Miss Hale. He moved toward the decanter, pouring himself a drink. I trust Saris hasn't been filling your head with inappropriate ideas. Only moderately inappropriate ones. He almost smiled. Almost. My sister is relentless when she decides to champion a cause. Is that what I am? A cause? The question hung between them. The Duke set down his glass, turning to face her fully. I don't know what you are, he admitted. Every category I try to place you in, you escape it. You're not a servant, though you were. You're not a lady, though you carry yourself like one. You're not a schemer, though you've positioned yourself in my household. You're not what? He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat of him. You're not someone I should think about constantly. Not someone whose voice I should hear when I'm trying to work, whose face I should see when I close my eyes. Her heart stuttered. Dryston, don't. His voice was rough. Don't say my name like that. Not when I can't. When we can't. Can't what? She stepped closer, eliminating the safe distance between them. Can't admit that something is happening here. Something neither of us planned. Something that could destroy us both. His hand rose, trembling slightly to touch her cheek. I'm not a safe choice. Meridia. People who get close to me suffer. Idaline, Adrian, Emmerich himself in the end. I bring death to everyone I care about. You didn't kill them. I might as well have. His thumb traced her cheekbone, tender and devastating. And now someone is using their ghosts to hunt me, and you're caught in the middle. I caught myself. Meridia covered his hand with her own. I chose to save you. I chose to stay. Those are my decisions, not your curses. For a moment, she thought he would kiss her. His gaze dropped to her lips, his breath shallow, his body leaning toward hers like gravity itself was pulling them together. Then he stepped back, his hand falling away. The Ashworth ball, he said, his voice carefully neutral. "You'll need a gown, something that makes a statement." "A statement?" "That you belong at my side." His eyes met hers, burning with everything he wouldn't say aloud. "If we're going to face this enemy, we face them together. As equals." He left before she could respond, but Meridia stood in the library long after, her cheek still warm where he'd touched her, her heart still racing with impossible hope. The gown was sapphire silk, dark as midnight water, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like scattered stars. Madame Aubriel, the modiste the dowager had summoned, pronounced it a masterpiece. Tansy wept when she saw Meridia wearing it. "You look like a duchess," she said softly. Meridia stared at her reflection and saw a stranger, elegant, confident, draped in beauty she had no right to wear. The transformation was complete. Only her eyes remained the same, wide with the fear she couldn't quite hide. The Ashworth Ball was the event of the season, and everyone would be watching. The servant who'd kissed the Duke, now appearing as his companion. Lady Venetia would be there. The mysterious conspirators might be there. Judgment and danger waited in equal measure. "Breathe," Saris advised, appearing in the doorway in rose-colored silk. "Remember, half of them are terrified of you." "Of me?" "You broke every rule and survived. That makes you either very powerful or very dangerous. Either way, they're afraid." She grinned. "Use it." The carriage ride to Ashworth House was tense. The dowager sat rigid with disapproval, having finally conceded to Meridia's attendance only after Saris's relentless advocacy. The Duke sat across from Meridia, his gaze fixed on the window, though she caught him glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking. "Remember," the dowager said as they approached, "you are a distant cousin of the Ashford line. Modest but genteel origins. Do not volunteer information. Do not rise to provocation. And for heaven's sake, do not kiss anyone." Meridia felt her cheeks warm. "I'll do my best." The ballroom was a blaze of candlelight and color, hundreds of guests swirling in elaborate gowns and impeccable tailcoats. Heads turned as their party entered. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "Steady," the Duke murmured, offering his arm. "They're just people. People who want to destroy me. Then we give them nothing to work with." His hand covered hers where it rested on his sleeve. "You faced an assassin's poison. You can face their gossip." They descended into the crowd, and the gauntlet began. Lady Thornberry approached first, all false sweetness and probing questions. Meridia answered with the careful vagueness Saris had taught her, deflecting without engaging. Lord Fenmore followed, his interest more genuine, asking about her impressions of London, with what seemed like actual curiosity. And then Lady Venetia appeared. She wore gold tonight, a deliberate choice that made her look like a trophy. Beautiful, valuable, meant to be possessed. Her smile was lethal enough to wound. "Your Grace, Miss Hale." She curtsied with exaggerated precision. "What a lovely gown. Almost passable for someone of your circumstances." "Lady Venetia." Meridia kept her voice pleasant. "How kind of you to notice. Your dress is quite striking as well. Gold suits those who need to announce their worth." The barb landed. Venetia's smile tightened fractionally. "I see you've developed some wit during your stay. How charming." She turned to the Duke, her expression softening into calculated warmth. "Your Grace, you must save me a dance, for old time's sake. I'm afraid my card is rather full this evening." "Surely not too full for me." Venetia stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "We have such history together, Drestan. Such understanding." Meridia watched the Duke's expression flicker, not with attraction, but with something like pity. He'd known this woman all his life. She'd been woven into his expectations, his obligations, the future everyone had planned for him. But expectation wasn't desire. "Perhaps later," he said. his tone making clear there would be no later. "If you'll excuse us, Miss Hale promised me the first waltz." He led Meridia onto the floor before Venetia could respond. The orchestra began, and they moved together with the ease of partners who had practiced, which they hadn't. "You're a natural," he observed. "Ceres drilled me mercilessly. My sister is persistent. She loves you." Meridia met his eyes. "She's afraid you're going to spend your whole life alone, punishing yourself for things that weren't your fault." The Duke's expression grew guarded. "She talks too much." "She talks exactly enough." Meridia let him turn her, the sapphire silk flowing around them like water. "Dristan, I know about Emmerich, about Idoline, about Aderin." His steps faltered almost imperceptibly. "Ceres had no right. She had every right. She's trying to save you from yourself." Meridia gripped his hand more firmly. "You didn't kill them. You didn't betray them. Emmerich's choices were his own, and the consequences were his own. Carrying his sins doesn't honor anyone's memory." "You don't understand. I understand grief." Her voice softened. "I understand guilt. My father died believing he'd failed us all, and I spent years wondering if I could have saved him. Said the right words, found the right solution, fixed what was broken. But some things can't be fixed by love alone. Some people choose paths we can't follow." The waltz carried them past Lady Venetia, past the dowager's watchful gaze, past hundreds of curious eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" the Duke asked. "Because whoever is using Valdris's name wants you trapped in the past. They want you paralyzed by old wounds." Meridia held his gaze fiercely. "Don't give them that power. Honor the dead by living, not by slowly dying alongside them." The music swelled toward its conclusion. Around them, the ballroom glittered with artificial beauty. Chandeliers, jewels, polished smiles hiding sharp intentions. But in this moment, none of it mattered. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "Do you know that? You walked into my world with nothing, and you see more clearly than anyone who's been here for years. Perhaps that's the advantage of having nothing to lose. You have plenty to lose." His hand tightened at her waist. "More than you realize." The waltz ended. They stood frozen in the center of the floor, neither moving to separate, while the crowd watched with bated breath. Then the Duke lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. Not a polite gesture, not a social formality, a declaration witnessed by everyone who mattered. "Miss Hale," he said, his voice carrying through the sudden silence, "would you honor me with the supper dance as well?" "I would be delighted, Your Grace." The whispers erupted like a storm, but Meridia barely heard them. She was too busy watching Lady Venetia's face contort with fury, seeing the dowager's expression shift from disapproval to reluctant acceptance, feeling the Duke's hand warm in hers as he led her away from the dance floor. Something had changed, something irreversible. And somewhere in the shadows of the ballroom, she could have sworn she saw a figure watching them, a man with cold eyes and a calculating smile who slipped away before she could get a better look. Ceres appeared at her elbow moments later, her face flushed with champagne and excitement. "That was magnificent," she breathed. "The whole room is talking about nothing else." But beneath her enthusiasm, Meridia noticed something she hadn't seen before, a flicker of anxiety in Ceres's eyes when she glanced toward the shadows where the mysterious figure had disappeared. As if she'd seen him too. As if she knew exactly who he was. The attack came 3 nights later. Meridia was alone in the library, reviewing the newest batch of threatening letters, when the window shattered inward. Glass exploded across the room. She threw herself behind the desk, her heart hammering, as a figure in black climbed through the broken frame. "Hello, Miss Hale." The voice was cultured, refined, exactly as she remembered from the servants' corridor. "We have unfinished business. She scrambled for the door, but he was faster. His hand closed around her arm, wrenching her back, spinning her to face him. The mask covered his features, but his eyes were visible, pale, cold, utterly without mercy. "You've caused considerable trouble," he continued conversationally. "The poison was elegant, untraceable. The Duke would have died, and no one would have known why. But you had to interfere. Let me go." "I don't think so." His grip tightened painfully. "You're going to tell me exactly what you've discovered about our operation. And then you're going to die, just like the Duke should have." The door burst open. The Duke stood there, pistol raised, his expression murderous. "Release her." The intruder laughed. "Ah, the gallant hero arrives. How predictable." He shifted Meridia in front of him, using her as a shield. "Lower your weapon, Your Grace, unless you want her blood on your hands." Meridia felt cold metal press against her throat. A blade, wickedly sharp. One wrong move and she was dead. "What do you want?" the Duke demanded, his pistol still raised, but his aim compromised. "What I've always wanted. What Emmerich wanted. Everything you have. Your title. Your fortune. Your precious legacy." The intruder's voice turned venomous. "You destroyed him. You took everything from him and left him nothing but death. Did you think there would be no reckoning? Emmerich chose his path. Emmerich was betrayed by a system that elevated you simply because of birth." The blade pressed harder. Meridia felt a sting of pain as it broke skin. "You were never worthy of what you inherited. He was brilliant, capable, destined for greatness. And you? You're nothing but an accident of blood. Then kill me." The Duke lowered his pistol. "Let her go, and take me instead." "Tristan, no." Quiet. His eyes met hers, filled with everything he'd never said aloud. "This isn't your fight, Meridia. It never was." How touching. The intruder's grip shifted. "But I'm afraid I need you both. You for leverage, and her because she's seen too much." Movement in the doorway. Ceres, white-faced, clutching a candlestick like a weapon. Guards behind her, hesitant, afraid to act with Meridia's life at stake. "One chance," the Duke said, his voice deadly calm. "Release her now, and I'll ensure you receive a fair trial. Continue this, and I promise you'll never leave this house alive." Empty threats from a desperate man. Not empty. Something cold entered the Duke's expression. "I've killed before. A man I once called friend. I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't hesitate either. Don't make me add another ghost to my conscience." The intruder went still. For a moment, the standoff held. Blade at Meridia's throat, pistol in the Duke's hand, tension thick enough to choke. Then the intruder made his move. He shoved Meridia forward, directly into the Duke's line of fire, and dove for the window. The pistol discharged, wild, missing, as the Duke caught Meridia instead of shooting. Glass crunched. The intruder vanished into the night. Meridia. The Duke's hands were everywhere, checking for wounds, finding the thin cut at her throat. "Are you hurt? Tell me you're not." "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She was shaking violently, her vision blurring with delayed terror. "He got away." "I don't care." His arms wrapped around her, crushing her against his chest. "I don't care if he got away. You're alive. That's all that matters." She buried her face in his shoulder and let herself break. The aftermath was chaos. Guards searched the grounds. The Dowager demanded answers no one could provide. Ceres hovered, pale and frightened, while Tansy pressed bandages to Meridia's throat with trembling hands. And Lady Venetia arrived within the hour, drawn by news of the commotion, her expression carefully arranged into concern that didn't reach her eyes. "How dreadful," she murmured, surveying the shattered window. "Miss Hale seems to attract danger wherever she goes. Perhaps it would be safer for everyone if she left." "She's not going anywhere." The Duke's voice could have frozen fire. "Your Grace, Be reasonable. Her presence clearly provokes these attacks. If she weren't here, I'd be dead. He turned to face Venetia fully, and something in his expression made her step back. The next person who suggests Miss Hale leave this house will answer to me personally. Is that understood? Venetia's mask slipped, revealing genuine fury beneath. You're making a terrible mistake, Dristan. This girl has bewitched you, blinded you to what's proper and right. Your grandmother agrees. I agree with nothing of the sort. The dowager stepped forward, and Meridia saw something shift in her expression, the frost cracking, revealing unexpected steel beneath. Miss Hale saved my grandson's life twice now. Whatever her origins, her courage is beyond question. Your Grace, surely, Lady Venetia. The dowager's voice could have cut diamonds. I suggest you return home. This is a family matter, and you are not family. The dismissal was absolute. Venetia stood frozen, her social destruction witnessed by everyone present. Then, without another word, she turned and swept from the room. But the look she cast at Meridia as she left promised this wasn't over. Later, when the chaos had settled and the house had fallen into uneasy quiet, Meridia found herself alone in her room, staring at the ceiling. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the blade at her throat, heard the intruder's cultured voice, speaking of reckoning and revenge. A soft knock, the Duke's voice through the door. May I come in? She should say no. It was improper, dangerous, everything they'd been pretending not to want. But she was tired of pretending. Yes? He entered, still in his evening clothes, looking as exhausted as she felt. For a moment, he simply stood there, watching her, with an expression that made her heart ache. I almost lost you tonight, he said quietly. And all I could think was that I'd never told you. Don't. Meridia shook her head. Don't say it now. Not when we're both still terrified and not thinking clearly. I've never thought more clearly in my life. He crossed to her bed, sitting on the edge without touching her. Meridia, I've spent 4 years convincing myself I don't deserve happiness, that anyone I care about will suffer for it. But watching that man hold a blade to your throat, his voice broke. I can't lose you, he said roughly. I won't survive it. Then help me stop them. Meridia sat up, taking his hands. We know the intruder is connected to Valdris, probably a relative, a protege, someone who shared his grievances. We know they have help inside this house. We know they won't stop until you're dead. Or until we stop them first. Exactly. She squeezed his hands. No more running. No more hiding behind walls. We face this together, and we end it. His forehead touched hers, breath mingling in the darkness. Together, he agreed. It wasn't a declaration of love. Not yet. But it was something better. A promise. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 3 days after the attack, Meridia was summoned to the dowager's private sitting room, alone, without the Duke, which made her immediately suspicious. Sit, the dowager commanded, gesturing to a chair. We need to talk. Meridia sat, her spine rigid with apprehension. The older woman studied her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. I've been unfair to you, the dowager said finally. When you first arrived, I saw only threat, a common girl disrupting our carefully ordered world. I didn't see courage. I didn't see integrity. I was wrong. Meridia blinked. Your Grace, let me finish. The dowager's expression tightened. I've received word from an old contact. Someone who knew Emmerich Valdris before his fall. She believes the attacks aren't random vengeance. They're connected to something Emmerich discovered before he died. A secret about the Ashford family that could destroy us all. What kind of secret? I don't know. But my contact mentioned a journal. Emmerich kept detailed records of everything. His plans, his discoveries, his grievances. If that journal still exists, it might explain who's continuing his work and why. Where would the journal be? The dowager's expression darkened. The Valdres estate, abandoned since Emmeric's death, but never sold. His creditors couldn't agree on how to divide the spoils, so it sat empty for 4 years. Meridia's mind raced. Someone needs to search it. Someone does. But Drystan cannot go. He's too well known, and the estate is watched. Saris lacks the necessary skills. The dowager's eyes met hers. You, however, are still largely unknown. A woman of common origin who could pose as a servant, a prospective buyer's agent, any number of covers. You want me to infiltrate the Valdres estate. I want you to end this. The dowager leaned forward. I've lost one grandchild to this feud. I watched my grandson bury his friend, and nearly bury himself in guilt. I will not lose anyone else. If you can find that journal, find the truth behind these attacks, I'll give you anything you ask for. Anything. It was a test, Meridia realized. The dowager was offering her a path to prove herself, or to fail spectacularly, and justify all the suspicions that had surrounded her from the beginning. The Duke will never agree. The Duke doesn't need to know, not until you return with answers. Meridia hesitated. Going behind Drystan's back felt like betrayal. But the dowager was right. He would never let her walk into danger alone, and his presence would only complicate matters. When do I leave? Tonight. The dowager stood, crossing to a desk drawer. I've arranged transportation and cover documents identifying you as Miss Ellen Hart, representing a London solicitor interested in acquiring the property. You'll have 3 hours to search before the caretaker returns. 3 hours to find a dead man's secrets in an abandoned estate. It was madness. But madness seemed to be Meridia's specialty these days. The Valdres estate was a ghost of its former glory. Windows dark, gardens overgrown, the once grand facade crumbling into neglect. Meridia picked the lock with a hairpin, a skill her brother Bram had taught her years ago, never imagining it would prove useful, and slipped inside. Dust and silence greeted her. Furniture draped in sheets, paintings removed from walls, the skeleton of a life that had ended in disgrace. She moved through room after room, searching methodically. Desk drawers first, then bookshelves, then beneath floorboards, until she noticed mortar dust scattered beneath the fireplace mantel in the study. She found it hidden behind a loose brick, a leather-bound book filled with Emmerich Valdres's cramped handwriting, dates, names, accusations. Meridia opened it and began to read. An hour later, she understood everything. The carriage ride back to Ashford House passed in a blur. Meridia clutched the journal, her mind reeling with what she'd discovered. The conspiracy wasn't about revenge for Emmerich's death. It was about covering up his murder. Emmerich Valdres hadn't died in a duel. He'd been poisoned. The same poison that had nearly killed the Duke at the ball. And according to his journal, he'd discovered proof that someone within the Ashford household was responsible. Someone who was still there. Someone who had been playing them all along. Meridia burst into Ashford House near midnight, finding the Duke pacing the entrance hall, his expression thunderous. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "My grandmother claimed you were resting, but your room was empty. I found it." Meridia thrust the journal into his hands. Emmerich's journal. The truth about everything. She watched his face as he read, saw shock, disbelief, and finally a terrible understanding settle into his features. "This can't be right," he breathed. "It's all there. Every detail, every piece of evidence." Meridia gripped his arm. "Drystan, Emmerich didn't die in that duel. He was dead before you ever faced him. Poisoned the night before. The same mixture used at your ball. The duel was staged to cover it up." "But I shot him. You shot a corpse. Or near enough." Meridia's voice gentled. "You didn't kill him. You never killed him. The guilt you've carried all these years was manufactured by the real murderer." Who? The word came out broken. Who did this? Meridia turned as footsteps echoed on the marble floor. The dowager emerged from the shadows, and behind her, Ceres. Her face was pale, her dark eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry," Ceres said, her voice barely audible. "But you weren't supposed to find out, not like this." The journal fell from the Duke's hands as understanding crashed through him. His sister. His own sister had been part of the conspiracy all along. The silence that followed was absolute. Meridia stared at Ceres, bright, warm Ceres, who had championed her, befriended her, guided her through the treacherous waters of society, her ally, her confidant, her betrayer. "Explain," the Duke said, his voice terrible in its calm. "Now." Ceres's tears spilled over, tracking silver paths down her cheeks. "I didn't know what they were planning. Not at first. I believed. Start from the beginning." The dowager's voice was steel wrapped in winter. "And do not lie to us again." The story emerged in fragments, broken by sobs and pleas for understanding. 4 years ago, Ceres had been a lovesick girl of 15, desperately infatuated with Emmerich Valdris. He'd cultivated her affection, used her as a source of information about the household, about her brother's movements and vulnerabilities. "He said he loved me," Ceres breathed. "He said we'd run away together once he'd secured his fortune." I believed every word. "You helped him plan the attack on Dryston," the dowager said flatly. "The original attack. I didn't know it would be violent. He told me he just needed access to certain documents, proof of some business wrongdoing that would force Dryston to share the family fortune. I gave him keys, schedules, servant rotations." Ceres's voice cracked. "When Idaline died, when everything fell apart, I realized what he really was. But by then, it was too late. He had letters I'd written, confessions that could destroy me." "Emmerich is dead," Meridia said. "His leverage died with him. But his partner didn't." Ceres looked up, her expression haunted. "There was always someone else, someone funding the operation, pulling the strings. Emmerich was just the pretty face. When he was killed, murdered, I know now. The partner took over. Used the same letters to control me." "Who?" The Duke stepped forward, his hands clenched at his sides. "Who is this partner?" "I don't know. I've never seen their face, never heard their real voice. They communicate through letters, through intermediaries." Ceres's gaze moved to Meridia. "The man you saw at the ball, watching from the shadows, he was one of the messengers. That's how I knew the attack in the library was coming. When you arrived, when you started asking questions, they panicked. The attack was supposed to silence you both. And you knew it was coming. I tried to warn you." Ceres's voice rose with desperation. "The candlestick, I came running because I knew something was wrong. I've been trying to protect you, while also feeding them information." The Duke's voice cracked. "Every conversation, every discovery, every step we took toward the truth. You reported it all. I had no choice. There's always a choice." He turned away, and Meridia saw his shoulders shaking. "You're my sister. My blood. I would have protected you, helped you, forgiven anything if you'd just told me the truth. You would have hated me. I hate you now." The words fell like stones into still water. "Leave. Get out of my sight, before I do something I'll regret." Ceres reached toward him. "Dryston, please." "Guards." The Duke's voice carried without him raising it. "Escort Lady Ceres to her rooms. She is not to leave them until I decide what to do with her." The guards appeared, faces carefully blank. Ceres went with them, casting one last desperate glance at Meridia, as if begging for intervention. But Meridia had no intervention to offer. She had trusted Ceres completely, had believed in their friendship without question. And all the while, she'd been feeding their enemy everything they needed to know. "I should go as well," the Dowager said quietly. "This requires thought and consideration. We cannot act rashly." "Grandmother, I know what you're thinking." The older woman's hand touched his shoulder briefly. "But she's still your sister, still my granddaughter. Whatever she's done, whatever she deserves, we cannot simply discard family." She departed, leaving Meridia alone with the Duke. For a long moment, neither spoke. Meridia watched the firelight play across his features. The grief, the rage, the devastating sense of betrayal that seemed to age him before her eyes. "I should have known," he finally said. The signs were there. Her nervousness whenever the investigation progressed. Her insistence on befriending you, keeping you close so she could monitor your discoveries. "She used me." Meridia's voice was flat. "Became my friend, specifically to spy on me." "Yes." And I believed her. The anger came now, hot and bitter. I trusted her completely, told her things I've never told anyone, and all of it went straight to the enemy. Not all of it. The Duke turned to face her, a new resolve hardening his features. "She never told them about us, about what's between us. How do you know? Because if she had, they would have used it against us, exploited it. The intruder in the library, he spoke of leverage, of making us suffer. But he never mentioned love." He stepped closer. "Whatever else Saris betrayed, she kept that secret. She protected you in the one way that mattered most." Meridia shook her head, unwilling to offer absolution so easily. "It doesn't undo the rest. No, nothing can undo the rest." He reached out, his hand cupping her face with heartbreaking gentleness. "But it tells me something I needed to know. Even corrupted by fear and manipulation, Saris saw what was growing between us and chose not to destroy it. That has to mean something." "What does it mean?" "It means she still loves me." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "And it means she saw that you're worth protecting, even at the cost of her own plans. I don't want to forgive her. Neither do I. Not yet." His forehead touched hers. "But we have to focus on what matters. The partner, the mastermind. They're still out there. Emrich's journal mentions someone powerful, connected, with access to both family estates. We need to identify them before they strike again." Meridia's mind worked through the possibilities. Someone who knew both families intimately. Someone who benefited from the chaos Emrich created. The Valdris estate was never claimed by creditors. It's been sitting empty for 4 years, technically under dispute, but practically abandoned. Unless someone wanted it to appear abandoned. Meridia's eyes widened. A base of operations, hidden in plain sight. Whoever's behind this might be using it even now. Then we go back. The Duke's expression hardened with resolve. "Together, this time, and we end this tonight." "What about Saris? She might warn them." "She has no way to communicate. I've ensured her rooms are isolated." He took her hand, his grip fierce. "This ends now, Meridia. No more ghosts. No more conspiracies. Whatever we find at the Valdris estate, we face it together." She should have been terrified. She was terrified. But beneath the fear was something stronger. The certainty that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. Together, she agreed. And hand in hand, they walked into the night. The Valdris estate was not empty. Light flickered in the upper windows as they approached, and voices drifted through the cracked shutters. The Duke had brought 4 trusted guards, but he held them back at the perimeter. "We go in first," he murmured to Meridia. "If this goes wrong, they'll need to get you out safely." "If this goes wrong, I'm not leaving without you." Something fierce and tender crossed his face. "Stubborn woman. You wouldn't have me any other way." They entered through the servants' passage Meridia had used before, moving silently through dusty corridors toward the light. The voices grew clearer, one sharp and commanding, Another softer, pleading. She's failed us for the last time. When this is over, Saris Ashford will face the same fate as her precious brother. Please, there must be another way. Meridia recognized the second voice. Lady Venetia. They crept closer, positioning themselves outside a partially open door. Inside, a makeshift command center had been established. Maps spread on tables, letters scattered across desks, the detritus of a 4-year conspiracy in plain view. And at the center stood a figure Meridia had never seen before. A man perhaps 50 years old, with silver hair and cold eyes that matched the description Emmerich had written in his journal. Lord Aldrich Ashford, the Duke's cousin, the man who would have inherited everything if not for Drystan's birth. Cousin. The Duke stepped through the doorway, pistol raised. I wish I could say this was unexpected. Aldrich turned, his expression shifting from shock to cold amusement. Dristan, how delightful. And you've brought your little servant girl. How touching. Lady Venetia went pale, stumbling backward. This wasn't. Save your protestations, my dear. Aldrich's voice dripped contempt. You've been useful, but you were always disposable. She helped you? Meridia asked, understanding crashing through her. Lady Venetia was part of this? Venetia provided access to society events, information about Drystan's movements, and most importantly, Aldrich smiled coldly, a convenient scapegoat if anything went wrong. Everyone suspected her jealousy. No one suspected mine. Jealousy? The Duke's pistol remained steady. Of what? A title you never wanted, responsibilities you've always avoided. Responsibilities I was trained for and then denied. Aldrich's mask slipped, revealing the fury beneath. My father raised me to be Duke, taught me everything I needed to know. And then your father produced a son, and suddenly I was nothing. A spare, an afterthought. So, you murdered Emmerich Valdres and framed me for it. Emmerich was a useful tool with ideas above his station. He wanted wealth and status. I promised him both. But he grew ambitious, started demanding more, threatening to expose our arrangement. Aldrich shrugged. The poison was elegant, don't you think? Same formula I've been perfecting for years. Your father died of natural causes. Did you never wonder how convenient that was? The Duke's face drained of color. My father took weeks longer than expected, but the result was the same. Heart failure, the physician said. Very tragic. Aldrich's smile was grotesque. And now you'll join him, the last obstacle to what should have been mine all along. But why wait 4 years? Meridia demanded, her mind racing. Why not strike immediately after the duel? Patience, Miss Hale. The initial scandal needed to fade. Suspicion needed to die down. And I needed your beloved Duke to remain unmarried, to produce no heir. Aldrich's eyes glittered with malice. Had he wed and sired sons, my path would have grown complicated. But Dristan was so obligingly consumed by guilt that he avoided attachment altogether. Until you. He moved with surprising speed, pulling a second pistol from beneath his coat. Meridia dove, shoving the Duke aside as the shot cracked through the room. Pain blazed across her shoulder. A graze, not a direct hit, but enough to make her cry out. The Duke's return shot was true. Aldrich crumpled, clutching his chest, his expression more surprised than pained. You actually shot me. For my father. The Duke's voice shook with controlled fury. For Emmerich's death on my conscience. For every sleepless night, every moment of guilt, every year spent believing I was a murderer. Aldrich laughed, blood bubbling on his lips. You're still going to lose. Even dead, I've already won. The letters I sent, the evidence I planted. Society will destroy you both. His eyes glazed over, and he spoke no more. Lady Venetia collapsed, sobbing. I didn't know about the murders. I swear I didn't know. He said it was just about separating you from that girl, making you see reason. You allied yourself with a monster." The Duke's voice was ice. "Whatever ignorance you claim, your choices led here." The guards entered, securing the scene. Two of them helped Venetia to her feet, her face streaked with tears, her society standing crumbling around her as she was led away. Meridia pressed her hand against her bleeding shoulder, watching as Aldrich's body was covered, as the conspiracy that had haunted this family for years finally came to an end. "Let me see." The Duke was suddenly beside her, his hands gentle on her wound. "You pushed me out of the way. You took a bullet for me. Just a graze. You took a bullet for me." His voice cracked. "After everything, after all my walls and distance and fear, you still, I love you." The words came easily, naturally, as if they'd been waiting all along. "I've loved you since the library, or maybe since the ball, or maybe since the moment I kissed you to save your life. I don't know when it started, but I know it's not going to stop." He kissed her there, in the ruins of his enemy's stronghold, with blood on her dress and chaos around them. It was desperate and gentle, and everything she'd never dared to hope for. "Marry me," he breathed against her lips. "Not because society expects it, not because scandal demands it. Marry me because I cannot imagine facing another day without you beside me." Yes, she was laughing and crying simultaneously. Yes, absolutely, yes. The wedding took place 3 months later at Ashford House, in the same ballroom where everything had begun. Society attended in droves, some genuine well-wishers, others merely curious to witness the Duke marry his servant girl rescuer. The Dowager presided over the proceedings, with an expression that might have been approval or might have been resignation. Ceres, pardoned, but not forgotten, watched from a corner with tears streaming down her face. Meridia wore white silk and the sapphire necklace Dryston had given her the night before. His mother's jewels, he'd said, for the woman who'd brought him back to life. The ceremony was brief, the celebration extravagant, but the moment Meridia treasured most came later, when they stood alone on the same terrace where she'd first glimpsed his vulnerability. "1 year ago today," he said, "you kissed a stranger to save his life. I remember. You changed everything." He pulled her close, his forehead touching hers. "You walked into my world with nothing but courage and honesty, and you dismantled every wall I'd built. You made me believe I deserved happiness. You always deserved it. You just needed someone stubborn enough to convince you." He laughed, a real laugh, full and warm, the sound she'd come to treasure above all others. My stubborn wife. My impossible husband. Below them, the ballroom glittered with lights and music. Above them, stars scattered across the velvet sky. And between them, in the warmth of their embrace, was everything that mattered. The quiet maid who'd kissed a duke. The broken man who'd learned to love again. And the scandal that became the greatest love story London had ever seen.